Yo, what up, everyone? Tay here. And it's been a while since we've talked about the cosmic side of the MCU. And I know that a lot of you guys are big fans of the cosmic stuff, so considering that there's been some big cosmic news coming out over the past few months, I figured that we should discuss that news and what Marvel Studios' big plans are for the cosmic side of the MCU once the multiverse saga is over in the next saga. But first, before we get into it, if you missed my last video on Fantastic Four and Avengers Doomsday, check it out. It is linked in the description down below. And also, don't forget to watch until the end of the video because we do have super thanks questions to get to, which, as always, remember that if you would like to leave a super thanks with a question or a comment on this video, that those are greatly appreciated and that I will read and respond to those in the next video. Okay, so we all know that the multiverse saga is going to end with Avengers Secret Wars in 2027, and after that, Marvel Studios are going to be transitioning right into their next saga, which Kevin Feige has said is already planned out for at least 5 years down the road, and that they have big plans, and that the transition from the multiverse saga into the next saga is not going to be like how the Infinity Saga transitioned into Phase 4, into the multiverse saga, because it is not going to be a slow transition, that it's just going to move right into it, and big things are going to happen right off the bat. And according to some new reports that have dropped over the last few weeks, it sounds like Marvel Studios are finally going to be focusing on the cosmic side of the MCU in the next saga, and that they might finally be doing the big interconnected cosmic saga that they've been teasing since all the way back in 2017. Because back during the promotional days of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, both Kevin Feige and James Gunn were teasing how Marvel Studios were using the Guardians movies to set up a bigger interconnected cosmic saga that would be largely separate from everything that's happening on Earth. And then because of what happened with James Gunn being fired and then rehired by Disney, it kind of screwed everything up, and while we have obviously gotten cosmic projects in the MCU since then, the whole interconnected cosmic saga never really happened. So even though I think that the main focus of the next saga is going to be more on mutants and things happening in the street level side of the MCU, it does sound like the cosmic side of things will pull a lot of the secondary focus and will get a lot of attention, and that we could finally start to see this bigger interconnected cosmic story playing out. And one of the first things we have to talk about that could possibly be at the center of the cosmic saga is a report that came out about a month or 6 weeks ago from Daniel Richman saying that Marvel Studios have recently revived their plans for an Annihilators movie to come out after the multiverse saga is over. Now, it is important to note that just because a project is in development, that doesn't mean that it's a sure thing to make it to the big screen. It just means that Marvel Studios are working on a script to see if it's something they want to move forward with from there. However, that said, there are multiple reasons why I do think that the Annihilators project will most likely be greenlit as one of the projects that we will see in the next saga. Because for one thing, this isn't actually the first time we've heard reports about an Annihilators project being in development, as this is something that Marvel Studios have reportedly been wanting to develop for a while. And I've always thought that an Annihilators movie would make a lot of sense for Marvel Studios to do, because the Annihilators could basically be the next evolution of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Because if you're not familiar, in the comics, the Annihilators were a cosmic super team that was formed by Cosmo to fulfill Star-Lord's dream of having an all-powerful team to protect the universe from cosmic foes. And the Annihilators included Ronan the Accuser, Gladiator, Silver Surfer, Quasar, Icon, Beta Ray Bill, and sometimes Nova. And if Marvel Studios have plans to do an Annihilators project, then the question that I have is if this is going to be a comic-accurate version of the Annihilators team, or if it will instead simply be like a rebranding of the Guardians of the Galaxy, like a Guardians 2.0. Because the other thing we've also heard reports of is that Chris Pratt could potentially be the lead of this movie, and that Star-Lord could be the one who puts the Annihilators team together. And like I said, that is not how the team was formed in the comics. In fact, Star-Lord wasn't even a member of the Annihilators. But considering that besides Ronan, who died back in the first Guardians movie, that none of the members of the Annihilators have officially been introduced into the MCU up to this point, I do think that having Star-Lord assemble the team instead of Cosmo would make a lot of sense. Because, for one thing, Chris Pratt as Star-Lord is one of the MCU's biggest and most beloved characters at this point. And at a time when Marvel Studios have been struggling, having a big-name actor and a big character to lead what could become a new franchise, I think is more important than ever to Marvel Studios. Because, back like 2 years ago when Bob Iger said that Marvel Studios were revamping their approach, the thing that he specifically mentioned is that going forward, Marvel Studios would be focusing more on green-lighting projects with big names and popular, well-established characters, as opposed to doing a whole bunch of projects just focusing on new characters like what we saw early in Phase 4. So if Marvel is going to introduce a new cosmic team, I do think it makes sense for them to have that team be led by a well-established popular character as an anchor point to draw in audiences and also to play off the popularity of the Guardians of the Galaxy, with the Annihilators basically acting as the Guardians' cosmic successor. So yeah, I could see a situation where Marvel Studios uses Star-Lord to be the big returning character who puts the team together, but then that the other characters on the team will be all new characters or mostly new characters, like potentially Norrin Rad, Beta Ray Bill, etc. However, one of the other big cosmic characters that I do think could potentially be involved in an Annihilators movie is also Richard Rider's Nova. Because as most of you likely know, last year it was confirmed that Marvel Studios were in early development of a Nova Disney Plus series with Richard Rider as the lead. But around 2 months ago, it was also revealed that Marvel Studios have now put that Nova series on pause, meaning that it's not necessarily canceled, but that it's also no longer in active development. And I was personally pretty disappointed to hear this, because what was reported about the Nova show is that it was going to be like Star Trek meets Starship Troopers, with Richard Rider leading a platoon of the Nova Corps on a variety of cosmic missions. And considering that Nova is a character that fans have wanted to see for over 10 years now since the first Guardians movie came out, I was kind of surprised that Marvel Studios were once again pushing back their plans to do something with Nova. And what Marvel Studios head of television, Brad Winderbaum, has said is that Marvel Studios are now going to be focusing more on annual serialized shows that can run for consecutive seasons instead of doing the one-off limited series that they were doing back in Phase 4 and Phase 5. And something else that was also recently reported on just a few days ago is that going forward, Marvel Television is going to focus their shows on more mature street-level projects like what they are doing with Daredevil Born Again, and kind of stick to something that's a little bit similar to what Netflix did with their Defenders saga. So hearing all of that, I think that's probably the reason why the Nova show has been put on pause, because it sounds like that's not really going to fit into what Marvel Studios are going to do with the television side of things going forward. So even though I thought the Nova show sounded pretty cool, and it is kind of a bummer that we might not ever see it, I don't think that means that Marvel Studios won't be moving forward with Nova as a character. Because considering that Nova was a character who was associated with the Annihilators in the comics, I do think that it would make a lot of sense for Nova to potentially be included in Marvel's plans for this potential Annihilators movie. And I don't think that this just makes sense because of the comics, because if Marvel does end up not going through with their plans for the Nova series, I could actually see certain elements and story ideas from that show actually being folded into their plans for an Annihilators movie. Because one of the other things that was also reported about the Nova show is that it was going to revolve around the Nova Corps investigating and battling against the Annihilation Wave, and that it was going to set up Annihilus as the main villain of the series. And Annihilus is a very big cosmic villain, especially to appear in a series instead of a movie. So perhaps that could be one element of the Nova show that could now be folded into Marvel Studios' plans for the Annihilators movie, and that this could be the big cosmic threat that brings this team together. You know, that maybe early on in the movie it could be revealed that the Annihilation Wave is wreaking havoc throughout the cosmos, and that this could be what leads to Star-Lord returning to space and putting together this new team to investigate what's happening, which could ultimately lead to Annihilus being revealed as the main villain of the movie. Now, we'll have to see what happens, because even though we are hearing these reports about an Annihilators movie being in development, it would likely still be at least 2 to 4 years until that movie realistically comes out. And as we know, a lot can change in that time. But I do think that something like this makes sense, because Chris Pratt has already confirmed that he will be returning to the MCU for the next saga, and that the legendary Star-Lord tag that was featured at the end of Guardians Volume 3 will come to fruition, and that there are big plans for Star-Lord in the future. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what comes of that, but like I said, I do think the Annihilators would make a lot of sense. But anyways, now that we've talked about the Annihilators, which could be the big centerpiece of the Cosmic MCU going forward, now let's run through what some of Marvel Studios' other plans could be with the Cosmic MCU in the next saga, with characters like the Eternals, the Fantastic Four, mutants, and others.
Behold, the Royal Prince of Titan, brother of Thanos, Star Fox of Mystery Planet.
Alright, so in this section, I want to talk about some of the new cosmic characters that we could see in the next saga, as well as which cosmic characters we could see return. So to start off, let's talk about the Eternals, because I know there are a ton of huge Eternals fans out there who are super bummed that Marvel Studios canceled their plans for the Eternals sequel. However, even though the plans for the Eternals sequel were canceled, I do still think that there is a good chance that we will see at least some of the Eternals characters returning at some point in the future in order to wrap up those loose plot threads from the first movie. Because the Eternals movie ended on a huge cliffhanger that really needs to be resolved. And if you guys remember, one of the insider scoops that dropped last year said that Marvel Studios do still have plans for the Eternals, and that some of the story elements that were planned for the Eternals sequel would now be folded into a different project. And back when that news came out, I did a video where I said that I thought it would make sense for those plans to be folded into the plot of Thor 5, and that Thor 5 could potentially adapt elements from the original Eternals comic run, where Thor and the Asgardians teamed up with the Eternals to defeat the Celestials and save the world from the fourth celestial host. And I still think that that is an idea that could really work well, because in the Eternals movie, it was confirmed that the Eternals once knew Thor and the Asgardians, and that the Eternals even fought alongside the Asgardians back in 965 AD to help them defeat the Frost Giants during the Battle of Tunsberg. So Marvel Studios have already laid some groundwork for a potential Asgardians and Eternals team-up in the future, and perhaps they could even include other gods like Hercules and the Olympians as a way to kind of also tie back into what happened in Thor: Love and Thunder. In fact, I don't know if you guys actually remember this, but there was actually an Eternals Will Return tag at the very end of the Eternals movie's credits. Now, obviously, just because they included that at the end of the credits doesn't mean that Marvel Studios are now somehow forced to bring the Eternals back. But it would be the first time that they didn't fulfill one of their so-and-so will return tags. And I do think that even though the Eternals movie may not have been as successful as Disney wanted, that there are a ton of big Eternals fans out there that would be pretty bummed and irritated if Marvel Studios never resolved that. And like I said, if we do see the continuation of the Eternals story in some project in the future, I do think that we will most likely have to wait until Phase 7 to see that happen. However, that said, I could totally still see at least some of the Eternals characters possibly showing up in Avengers Secret Wars. Because like I've talked about in the past, we all know that the events of Avengers Secret Wars are likely going to occur in the MCU's version of Battleworld. And the thing about Battleworld is it kind of gives Marvel Studios and the Russo brothers a license to really include any characters that they want or any actors that they can get to appear in the movie, because the whole concept of Battleworld is it's a big multiversal mashup of different realities and different characters. So I could actually see, one or two or three or four maybe of the Eternals characters, or at the very least, variants of the Eternals, possibly making some kind of small appearance in Avengers Secret Wars. And then some of the other cosmic characters that we've also heard will reportedly show up in at least one of the upcoming Avengers films is the present-day Guardians team that we saw at the very end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And while characters like Rocket and Groot are definitely popular Marvel characters, I don't really think that that team is popular enough for Marvel Studios to make a whole nother Guardians movie around. So what I think is definitely more likely is basically what I was talking about earlier, in that we could see Chris Pratt leading an Annihilators movie, and that could basically be like the next evolution of the Guardians. However, if that is what happens, it does beg the question of what will happen with the rest of the Guardians team. Those characters that we saw at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Because I definitely think that Marvel Studios will bring back Rocket and Groot at some point after the multiverse saga is over. And I also think that they definitely have some kind of plans to explore Adam Warlock in the future. But if it turns out that the Annihilators are basically like the evolution of the Guardians, then it's also possible that some of those characters could either appear in the Annihilators movie in some kind of side role, or could actually end up becoming members of the Annihilators team. Then two other teams that could also potentially be connected to Marvel's future plans for the Cosmic MCU are the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Because even though the X-Men is a team that is more often associated with the street level side of things, they have also been a part of some really big cosmic adventures and storylines in the comics. I mean, they are a team that crosses both the cosmic and the street level. And then with the Fantastic Four, it was actually just reported by Variety that Marvel Studios are already in early development for the Fantastic Four sequel that will likely come out in 2028. And just today, as I've been trying to finish up this video, the new final trailer dropped for Fantastic Four First Steps. And the trailer was awesome. I'm sure most of you guys have seen it by now. Definitely the most epic, darkest trailer we've seen so far. And what I thought was some of the coolest stuff we saw in this trailer is we actually see some brief glimpses of the Fantastic Four team as they follow Shala Bal out to Galactus' ship, Ta-2, to where it appears that they have a face-to-face meeting with Galactus and meet him for the first time. And it looks absolutely terrifying. And one of the things I really love about what they are doing with Galactus is that, Matt Shakman, the director, has talked a lot about how the Fantastic Four movie is very much inspired by Stanley Kubrick and 2001: A Space Odyssey. But he's also said that Galactus and the design of Galactus and the vibe of Galactus was very much influenced by H.R. Geiger and the early Alien movies. And you can totally see that in this trailer, in these brief scenes out in space when the Fantastic Four are encountering Galactus for the first time, and how it has that really dark H.R. Geiger vibe. Now, when it comes to the Fantastic Four sequel that comes out in 2028, there's really no way of knowing this far in advance what the plot of that movie is going to be. But, in my last video, I was talking about the footage that was shown from Fantastic Four First Steps at CinemaCon, and how that footage confirms that after this scene we saw in the trailer when the Fantastic Four first meet Galactus for the first time, that when they rush back to their ship and fly away, that this turns into a big chase sequence with Shala Bal flying after them, and that during this sequence, Reed Richards tells Ben to fly into a nearby black hole to escape. And I didn't give a spoiler warning at the beginning of this video, but I am getting into some light spoiler territory, or possible spoiler territory, so just be forewarned. But there were actually some Fantastic Four First Steps leaks that dropped last year that said that they were based on an earlier version of the Fantastic Four script. And in those leaks, they said that the earlier script included a scene where the Fantastic Four were being chased by Shala Bal and they escaped into a black hole, and that when they flew into this black hole, it actually took them to a different universe. And that because of that, because Shah Labal knows about this and Galactus knows about this, that this actually opens up the doorway for Galactus to then travel to another universe, just like the Fantastic Four end up doing. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's possible that if Galactus isn't completely defeated in Fantastic Four First Steps, that Marvel Studios may leave a door open for Galactus to enter into the main MCU 616 timeline the same way that the Fantastic Four do. Which, of course, would in turn then also open the door for Galactus to return as a cosmic villain in the future. And frankly, even if Galactus doesn't travel through a black hole to get to the MCU 616 universe, we know that Avengers Secret Wars is likely going to end with the multiverse being reset or rebirthed. And that is also a prime opportunity to explain how Galactus could also be reborn into the new MCU 616 universe that is created during that multiversal reset, because that is what happens with Galactus in the comics. Now, even if Galactus does end up being a future villain in the cosmic MCU, I don't think he'll be the villain in the Fantastic Four sequel, because that would just be repeating themselves. But something I talked about earlier was how Annihilus was reportedly going to be the main villain that was set up in the Nova series. And that now, with the Nova series looking like it might not happen, that Annihilus could potentially be moved and used as the main villain in a different cosmic project, like perhaps the Annihilators movie. However, Annihilus is a villain who is very much associated with the Fantastic Four, so maybe Annihilus could end up being the villain of the Fantastic Four sequel, and we could see them go to the negative zone and all of that. Or if Marvel Studios are going to finally be putting together a bigger interconnected cosmic saga that is kind of separate from what's happening on Earth, maybe Annihilus could end up being like the Thanos-level villain of that cosmic saga, and it could tie in all sorts of different cosmic characters like the Annihilators, the Guardians, and the Fantastic Four. Now, that's just like loose speculation of different stuff we could see. But yeah, since this final Fantastic Four trailer just dropped as I was finishing up this video and already talking about the Fantastic Four sequel, I thought I'd bring it up and quickly talk about how what we will see in the Fantastic Four movie could also tie into future stuff with the Cosmic MCU in the next saga, even though the Fantastic Four First Steps is taking place in a different universe. And then one other thing I wanted to mention that was recently reported on by Cosmic Circus is that Marvel Studios reportedly have plans to introduce Teddy Altman, aka Hulkling, in Phase 7, and that he is a character that will also have a big role to play in Marvel's plans for the Cosmic MCU. And I think most fans are expecting that Marvel Studios are likely going to introduce Hulkling in the upcoming Champions/Young Avengers project. So if this report is true and that Marvel Studios have plans for Teddy Altman to be a big character in the cosmic stuff, then this could mean that Marvel Studios still have some big future plans for both the Kree and the Skrulls, because in the comics, Teddy Altman is a half Kree, half Skrull hybrid who is pivotal at unifying these two races after eons of war. And if this is the case, then this could also mean that Teddy might be the character who is kind of at the center of Marvel Studios' Young Avengers project, and that project could be adapting elements from the Young Avengers Volume 2 comic run, where both the Kree and the Skrulls come to Earth trying to take Teddy away, and the Young Avengers have to team up with the Avengers to try and stop them. And I'm not a big fan of like the later Young Avengers comics, but those early Young Avengers comics were pretty good, so I would be cool if that's the comic they decided to pull from, for influence for the Young Avengers or Champions show. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think about all this. I'm going to try to keep this video from going on too long. I'm sure there will be plenty of cosmic stuff we can talk about in the future. But yeah, since it's been a while since I've done a video purely on the Cosmic MCU, I thought it'd be fun to talk about all the updates that we've gotten over the past few months regarding where everything is at with Marvel Studios' plans for the Cosmic MCU and what could happen in Phase 7 with the cosmic stuff in the next saga. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. And of course, if you like the video, please like and share it. That always helps out a lot. But don't go anywhere just yet because we do still have super thanks to get to. So let's jump into those.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so jumping into these super thanks, the first one we have is 5 from Stu Redman, and this one says, "What up, Tay? We've heard theories that Tony's snap allowed him to see the multiverse or even see himself as Victor, but there are no real crumbs for that. Both Thanos and Hulk used the stones, and it was pretty straightforward. There was nothing to suggest the stones did anything more for them. But what if the stones instead interacted with the AI that was in Tony's suit, and that is what allowed him to see these things, similar to Infinity Ultron? That could make a ton of sense, and it would be interesting to explore from there. Thoughts?" All right, thanks, Stu. And, to be honest, I'm not really sure what I think of this one. There's so many theories around Doctor Doom at this point. There are a lot of them that make sense, and then some that kind of make sense. And it really is something I just kind of go back and forth on. There are so many different ones that I think make sense. I do like the idea of them playing with the idea of Tony being adopted and that stuff. I talked about that before. But I'm not sure if it'll be something that ties in directly with the Infinity Stones or not. But the Russo brothers have hinted that it will have something to do, most likely, with Tony's role and death in Avengers Endgame. Now, they didn't straight out say that, but it was definitely something they alluded to in an interview like 2 months ago. So yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, but I'm always down for more Doctor Doom theories. Then the next one we have is a very generous $35 from Jeffrey Fettis, not sure how to say that. But this one says, "My question is, how do you think the upcoming Avengers films will pay homage to the Beyonder? Do you think he'll appear? I saw a theory on Reddit that said that Loki might appear to the heroes in an alternate identity as the Beyonder because he knows that they won't trust him. Have you heard anything about this?" And actually, I have not heard this theory, but it is one I like because I do think that the Russos will probably try to pay homage to the Beyonder in some way, considering that he was a big part of the original Secret Wars comic. And we know that the Russo brothers are huge fans of the original Secret Wars comic from the early 80s because it was a big influence on them when they were kids. So I don't think they're going to take a lot of story elements from the original Secret Wars comic, but I do think they are going to pay homage to a lot of little things that happen in that comic. Visual stuff like Hulk holding up the mountain, stuff like that. So I haven't heard this theory about Loki disguising himself as the Beyonder, but I do think that would be cool, and I could see something like that happening. I don't know if it will happen, but I like the idea. So yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. It's definitely something I will think about, and maybe we'll talk about it more in a future video. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Jeffrey. Very much appreciated. Then moving on, the next one we have is 5 from Steve James 7930. And this one says, "Hey Tay, great vid as always. With the reboot coming after Secret Wars, a lot of people assume that Tom Holland is staying. But he and Zendaya have been very adamant that they are quitting acting after they have kids, and that they plan to do that shortly after their wedding next year. I'm very happy for them, but sad to see Peter Parker go. I know he's contracted to do Spider-Man 5 and 6, but even if he did those and then retired, that means we'd only get Peter Parker in the new universe for a few short years. Do you think Marvel will pass the torch to Miles Morales instead, or do you think they'll reboot with a new Peter Parker? Or do you just think they'll recast Tom Holland's character with a new actor similar to William Hurt / Harrison Ford?" All right, thank you very much for this one, Steve. And, this is something I would personally just not read too much into for the time being, because Tom Holland and Zendaya say they're going to retire from acting once they have kids, we don't know realistically when they're actually going to have kids, regardless of what they say. And also, we don't know for sure that they are really going to retire once they do. I'm sure they'll take time away, and maybe they will retire, but many, many times throughout the decades, actors have made statements like this, and they eventually come back. And like you said, we know that Tom is set to appear in Spider-Man 5 and 6, and he's most likely going to appear in at least one other MCU project after the multiverse saga is over as well. So yeah, man, I wouldn't worry about this too much. If it does happen, it'll be several years down the line, and they'll just deal with it then. And I imagine they probably would bring in Miles Morales, and that he might take over for a little bit, but that they definitely would recast Peter Parker shortly, that he wouldn't be absent for too long. So yeah, thanks for that, Steve. And then the last one we have is another long one from my guy Negative O Zane. And this one says, Hey Tay, I have one last theory / super thanks for you. I'm moving out of my parents' house and getting my own apartment, and with the price of everything going so expensive, I'm trying to be more financially responsible and budget better. As you are one of my favorite creators, I figured I'd give you one last donation. Awesome, dude. I appreciate that. I know. I feel you. Things are crazy expensive. I can't afford stuff, so I appreciate it altogether. Anyways, this theory actually came to me in a dream, so bear with me. It was the big final battle of Secret Wars on Battleworld between the Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and some good variants of villains fighting against Doom, some evil variants of heroes, and some Doombots. However, the fight was all a distraction orchestrated by Pedro's Reed Richards so that he could make a machine with the help of an Iron Man variant played by RDJ to siphon and fuse Franklin's cosmic powers, Wanda's chaos magic, the temporal auras from Tom's Spider-Man, Hugh's Wolverine, the variant of Iron Man, and Pedro's Reed, because they are all the anchor beings of their respective universes. They then use this unique energy / power source as, at first, a weapon to take down Doom's power, then as a seed to plant a new universe, a universe where the Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man all live in harmony. Wanda also fulfilled the prophecy of the Scarlet Witch by destroying the world, Battleworld. Anyways, although this is my last super thanks, at least until Doomsday comes out, I'll still be watching your videos and clicking the notifications as soon as I see them. Wishing you the best. P.S. I'd love to see some UFO videos. All right, fun theory, dude. I'm not going to address all of it, but I can appreciate a good dream theory. The one thing I do want to address is what you said about Wanda's prophecy being fulfilled by her destroying Battleworld. That's a cool theory. I haven't thought of that. You know, I have talked about the Scarlet Witch prophecy before and how Doctor Doom could potentially use the power of the Scarlet Witch to destroy the world before he creates his new universe, you know, at the end of Avengers Doomsday. But I like this theory as well, because however it happens, I do think that there is a good chance that the prophecy that was teased in both WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness about the Scarlet Witch being destined to destroy the cosmos or destroy the world is something that the Russo brothers are likely going to write into the plots of the upcoming Avengers movies. And I think I've discussed multiple theories on that, but this is a new one I hadn't thought of before that I think is really cool as well. So yeah, I think that's a really cool take, dude. And yeah, I am definitely working on the UFO stuff. You know, a lot of you guys were really into that idea, but I did see some of you guys saying, yeah, maybe you should just make it a separate channel. And I do think that's probably the better idea. So I think that's what I'm going to do. But then once I do that, I will maybe post some snippets on here and just let you guys know about the other channel. And then hopefully once I do that, you guys will go and subscribe to that new channel and give it some love and some views so it'll start to grow and get some attention. So yeah, I'm definitely super eager to do that because if you guys heard me talk about UFOs in the past, I'm definitely a big UFO nerd, and that would be a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks for that, dude. I appreciate it, and good luck getting your own apartment. That's awesome, especially with how expensive things are. So yeah, thank you very much for that, man, and I still look forward to seeing your theories in the comments. But anyways, that is it for the super thanks for today. Hopefully I didn't miss any. If I did, I will definitely get to those in the next video. And for all of you watching, remember that if you would like to leave a super thanks with a question or a comment in this video, that those really do help out so much, just like Negative Ozane said, because everything is so expensive nowadays, every little bit helps. So yeah, if you'd like to leave a super thanks, I will read those in the next video. And then, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you missed my last one, posted a few days ago on Avengers Doomsday and the Fantastic Four and some big crazy theories and leaks, you should definitely check that out. It's linked in the description down below. And then also come follow the channel on Twitter. And lastly, if you are not subscribed to the channel and a big fan of Marvel and the MCU, then you should subscribe because that is what we talk about here. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will be back soon with the next one.